Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to my show, High Road to Humanity. In every episode, I tell you powerful true stories filled with great wisdom that you can use in your own life as you strive for a higher road to travel. My featured guests will have their own unique stories to tell that enlighten your mind and your soul. So kick back, relax, and learn the secret to success when you take the high road.
First touch, strong connection, it lays deep in your soul.
Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And I'm here today with David Salomon, and we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins. And welcome, David, to High Road to Humanity.
Nancy, thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited you're here. You know, I'm finally in my new abode. I've moved and I've been in odd places, and people have been watching me on the show in my Airbnbs. And so I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be with you. This is a really interesting book. You guys, let me give you a little synopsis. You know, David's a PhD. He's the director of the undergraduate research and creative activity at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia. He's been a professor of English for almost 20 years, and his previous publications include an introduction to the Glossae Ordinaire as medieval hypertext. But today we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins. And before you even tell us your story, I'm just going to say the 7 deadly sins that we're going to talk about today. So you guys, we're going to talk about pride. We're going to talk about lust, anger, gluttony, avarice, envy, and sloth. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we're kind of going to focus on a few. But David, why did you write this book? Why did you feel that? I mean, obviously our world's crazy. Let's talk about this. I mean, tell us a little bit about your background. You grew up in a Jewish family.
I did. I grew up a Jew. Still consider myself I call myself a Judist these days because I'm more Buddhist than I am Jewish, but it's a combination.
Okay.
Grew up in New York City in the Bronx, and ended up then always interested in religion.
Right.
Always interested in religion and things that related to spirituality as a kid. In fact, when I was much younger, folks thought I was going to eventually be a rabbi. And then kind of went through what a lot of people go through in my late teens and early 20s, a real sort of crisis of faith and understanding who I was. Right. And eventually got a PhD in medieval and Renaissance literature, religion, and culture, and always wrote and studied about the history of religion and spirituality, particularly Catholic spirituality and the history of the Catholic Church. I'm kind of odd for a Bronx Jew.
Yeah.
And then went on and taught for several decades, and came here to Christopher Newport 6 years ago to open up this Office of Undergraduate Research and Creative Activity. And so, you know, it's been an interesting journey. Life is a journey, of course. And I would have never expected to be sitting here where I am talking to you today if I look back 30 years ago. Okay. But nonetheless, here I am.
Well, my first question, I guess, is through your journey and through your studies, has it brought you closer to God, to the divine?
I think it has challenged me through my studies, and let me sort of set out first the distinction between the study of this stuff and then the personal involvement, right? For some people, they really blend together. For many people, they remain two separate kind of things. I think for me, my personal spirituality and my personal belief system have certainly been informed by my studies, no doubt. But to blend the two together, I think would be a mistake. And let me give you a couple of anecdotes. So, I mean, I teach courses on history of religion. I teach courses on spirituality. I teach a course on mysticism. Excuse me. And first day of class, I always say to students, that if you saw Jesus on a tortilla last night, this is the wrong class for you, because that's not what we're doing. These are academic studies of these topics, which is a little bit different from the personal study of them. Excuse me, something in my throat. So I think it has brought me closer to an understanding of who I am more than anything else. I'm not sure what my beliefs are currently, to be honest, about the idea of God, and I'll put that in quotation marks. I do have a personal sense that there is a presence in the universe. What that might be and what we might call it, it's a variety of things. I am very much a Jungian. I study Carl Jung quite a bit. I teach a course on his archetypes. And I really am intrigued by his idea of the collective unconscious. And I think that's the kind of thing that's running through time and through the universe and through all of us.
Now, I'm a seeker of truth. Are you a seeker of truth? Can you call yourself a seeker of truth by your study?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess, and I'll just, this is just me, and I understand how it's interesting to hear your take on things. The more I learn from people like you, the more I read, the more I connect with the divine, that higher energy, that source energy, that love energy, the more intrigued I become and the more I learn. And things become more apparent, I think, the more you delve into this stuff. So I just want to say that. I just think for me, it's a connection. I meditate, not for a long period of time, but a short period of time, but I connect to God every day. And you can call it whatever you want, energy, vibration, whatever it is, that higher power. And that has led me to even more looking more for the truth. Do you feel like that too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and as I said, I mean, I always talk with students and say, all of this is a journey, right? I mean, it's a pilgrimage, and it's more important to pay attention to the process than it is the product. You're not going to arrive at that end point where you're going to say, oh, I've got it all figured out, I'm all set. Because I would assume that, for many people and in many belief systems, the only way that you're going to achieve that is through death, and the transcendence from the physical body. While we are physical bodies, we're on a constant search, constant quest for truth, for what truth is. And I think that you're right. I mean, I respect what you're saying. I think it's true for me as well, that the more that I read, the more that I understand, it pulls back the curtain a little bit more. But I am not somebody who believes that I will have it all figured out one day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the 7 deadly sins. I picked out a few. I wanted to start with pride.
Sure.
I thought this was interesting. I've never really covered it. You say the covenant is broken. Well, it was broken when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of life. And then
tree of knowledge.
Or tree of knowledge. I'm sorry. Well, okay. I wrote down tree of life. Anyway, so I thought this was really interesting. You wrote, because I never looked at it this way, you wrote that Adam blames Eve. And he says, well, I'm not guilty. She told me to do it. And it's so interesting. In the very beginning, I never looked at it like that. I was like, gosh, he didn't take responsibility for himself. That's
what that whole story is about in Genesis, is a question of whether or not human beings are going to stand up and take responsibility for their actions. And the seminal origin story for human beings in the Western world, the story of Adam and Eve, shows us that they don't. God comes down to Adam and says, what did you do? He says, that woman you gave me, she tempted me and I ate. Then he goes to the woman and he says, what did you do? And she said, the serpent made me eat. Neither one of them takes responsibility for what they've done. So it's what I call in the book a shifting of blame, right? It sort of sets a paradigm for human beings.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of crazy because I look at it and think, well, here, this is God, you'd have to tell them the truth. I mean, obviously
that's the test, right? It's a test of whether they're going to tell the truth. And of course, the great paradox of that story is God knows what they did. God is omniscient, right? Knows all.
Yes.
And so when he asks them what they did, he's hoping, I think, that they're going to take responsibility for their own actions, and that they don't. They fail to do that.
Right. You know, I think, not to get off the subject here, but if I were God, because I think sometimes, man, I'd really be disappointed. I mean, there's some really great people in this world, but there's some stuff. And I bet he was
Yeah.
like, I'm so disappointed. I was hoping for more.
Yeah, I mean, you have to wonder. I mean, you know, for those of us who think about it in those terms, and I often do. I mean, I teach a course called The Bible as Literature, where we look at these stories as literary texts.
Mhm.
And so looking at those at the figures in the Genesis story as characters, if you look at God as a character, yes, he must be incredibly disappointed in what he just created.
Yeah. And look what he created. And look how great we are. It's just so crazy. But I feel like we had to evolve and understand these things. So that's another show. But pride, let's get back to pride. Now I wrote down, these are my notes, and I want you to talk about it. People do, and I've noticed this. This is just real life stuff, man. People have a real high opinion of themselves, a real sense of importance, attitude of superiority. I guess I'm trying to get this out. But you know, how can I say this? A lot of people, when I think of pride, I think of being proud of who you are, being
Right.
proud of your name, being proud of your accomplishments. But then on the flip side, there is a pride that is, how can I put this? So proud that you're not living. I don't know if
Right.
that's the right word. Talk about,
Right.
there's
Well, there's that distinction, and it's the curiosity, isn't it? And I mentioned that in the book. I mean, you know, we tell
yeah,
people, you know, we tell kids, be proud of yourself, right? I mean, have pride in what you do,
right.
and you know that's fine. But then if we really go back and look at what pride is as a sin, it is basically thinking more of yourself than you really are. So it's an inflated sense of self.
It's an inflated sense of self. Now, this is an interesting subject, and this is one thing I thought about. You know, we're all starting to go within. We're all starting to learn that ourself, that we're important, that to look at the self, because, and this is where this comes in. This is really interesting, because society has always put it, oh, don't be so, into yourself. Don't be so into yourself. Now we're starting to realize, wait a minute, we have to go within, because the treasure lies within, and the focus has to be on who we are, and we have to work on ourselves to raise our vibration. But I feel like, and I just want to hear your opinion, there's like a fine line there.
There is, to be sure. I mean, there's a fine line between, you know, as you say, going into yourself and looking within, which is certainly something which is vital for us to do as human beings. I mean, I reiterate constantly the importance of reflection and contemplation.
Right.
But there, at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that, you know, as the kids would say, we're not all that. You know, there are other people in the world.
Yeah.
And understanding our relationships with those other people is just as important as understanding who we are. Now, in some sense, we need to understand who we are before we can take that next step.
That's what I think. I
Yes.
think we're not taught to work on our
No.
inner selves. We're always taught to look on the outside. And it's just now in the last few years that people are starting to realize, wait a minute, the treasure is not out there. It's not in the stuff. It's
But the
in.
interesting thing there, Nancy, is that that largely is a Western approach. I mean, you know, when I teach Western and Eastern religions, we can sort of split the two down the middle and make a real clear distinction.
Mhm.
Western religions pray to an external God. Eastern religions, it's look within and make changes from within. So you know, you use that language, and it's really interesting because I think that for a lot of folks who are in the West, they are focused on the external, whereas, and I'm overgeneralizing, in Eastern traditions, it's more about looking within. I mean, think about how much focus there is on meditation in
Mhm.
most Eastern religions and spirituality traditions,
Right.
whereas in the West, that's not the case.
Right.
It's more about, oh, I'm going to pray to a deity. I'm going to ask for help. The East would say, you want help? Look within and help yourself.
Right. Well, because they realize there is a higher self,
Right.
that are different dimensions. And that's what we're starting to realize, which I think is fabulous, because we've got to change. There has to be a change. And
Oh, there has to be, because the way that we're operating is not working, clearly.
well, and it says in the Bible, to thine own self be true.
Mm-hmm.
And that has gotten lost, and it's starting to come back. Be true to thyself. Be true to thyself. It's not wrong to be true to thyself. And I'm working on this. I just want to tell you this. I work on this all the time, because I'm one of these giver people. So I'm an empath, and I'm always wanting to help everybody. And I have had to literally stop and think to do for me first.
Right.
I've had to change my thought process, truly. And I know this, so if I've had to do it, I know other people are probably doing it too.
Yeah. I mean, I experienced something very similar, and I think many people do. I mean, look at the almost obsession in mainstream media with self-care.
Yeah,
That you need to embrace and engage in self-care. And
right.
most of us stink at it. I mean, I know I do. I'm also a giver, and I do not take enough time for self-care. But it's that stereotypical bit about, if the air masks drop from the, you put it on the kid next to you before you put it, you put it on yourself before you put it on the kid next to you. You need to take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
And I think that by and large we're starting to realize that that is really important.
It is. It's taken me a long time, and I'm glad that we're talking about this, because that's going to be, I see that as a big shift for humanity, as
Yeah.
we start to not be prideful, but be self-aware, care about ourselves, self-knowledge, encouraging us to grow. I think it encourages growth. And you say that in the book, that it will
Yes.
encourage growth for the whole. You guys, this is the book. It came out a little while ago. It's done pretty well, hasn't it?
It's done okay. Yeah, it came out. Unfortunately, it came out just when COVID hit.
Well, that's okay. It gave people time to read it. You know,
Yes.
give people a little time. All right, well, let's move on a little bit. Let's go. So I think my next, I made notes, you guys. Y'all know how I work. So my next thing is anger. And the reason I brought anger up is because I just feel like there's so much anger in the world. And I just feel like there's like pent up anger. And I thought this was really interesting. You put a quote in the book by Eleanor Roosevelt: anger is one letter short of danger. And it's crossed that line in my mind. Talk
Yeah.
about
It's a problem. And these sins, these 7 deadly sins, which were outlined centuries ago by a Syrian monk first, Evagrius Ponticus.
right.
These 7 deadly sins are about excess. So the idea, again, so if we go back to pride, yes, have pride in yourself, but not to excess.
Mm-hmm.
It's silly to think that we're not going to get angry. We're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But when anger becomes a sin, it crosses a line and becomes excessive.
Right. You say this is really interesting stuff. So I can't wait to hear what you say about this. So 1910 to 1950 were angry times. Why do you say they were angry times?
Well, I mean, think about the 2 world wars.
Okay.
Just there, 2 world wars that were just horrible events. The Holocaust. We had a Great Depression in the middle of all of that. And it was a period of time when it seemed just like humanity was angry at itself, we were angry at each other. And I think that in many ways, and it's one of the reasons why I go back and cite a lot from 2 thinkers throughout the book. One is the British novelist D.H. Lawrence. The other is the French poet Paul Valéry, both who wrote really incredible essays throughout the first half of the 20th century, commenting on the state of humanity. And I think a lot of what they had to say still applies today. Everything old is new again in some ways. We still live in, I think, pretty angry times. This book really started out because I'd written an essay about anger for another book that was being published called Understanding Angry Groups. And it was about looking at groups, terrorist groups, hate groups, that kind of thing in our culture. And I was asked to write a chapter for the book on anger in the Bible, and talking about the way it is that the fact of the matter is that anger isn't something which is new. It's pretty clear throughout even the Bible text that anger is just part of who we are as human beings.
Yeah, and you write in here, some of this is just, I started really hit home. Like people are obsessed with making things go faster, more efficient. Like we don't have any patience. And that goes, people get angry. And I started to think about this. Traffic lights don't change quick enough. And I'm just going to be straight because I always am honest and upfront on my show. I used to be one of those people years ago, and that's a long time ago, but I used to be one of those where I was sitting at the light, or you see the microwave.
The microwave, yeah. People who stand at the microwave with their hand on the handle waiting for it to start to beep.
Yeah,
because 2 minutes isn't fast enough to cook your dinner.
Yes, all this hit home because, well, let me just back up. I can remember sitting at the light like that. Now I'm not like that. Why am I not like that? I started to think about it yesterday when I was making notes and going through your book, and I realized it's because I meditate. It's because I connect with God. Now I don't do that anymore. I used to do that, but I don't do it anymore.
And meditation also forces you to slow down.
Yes.
Right. We live in a world which is so fast.
Right.
So driven by data and technology that, the engaging in meditation on a daily basis, even if it's for 5 minutes,
right,
just forces you to slow down. And that's very important.
No, it is. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so the traffic light was like, yeah, I used to do that. Don't do it anymore because of meditation. Microwave. Now, you know what? I don't use the microwave anymore.
Really? Good for you.
Yeah. And it's a conscious effort because it's really easy to walk over with my cup of coffee and stick it in there.
Sure.
I like what it does to my coffee. So I get out a pot and I pour it in there and I do it for me. And that's taken all these years for me to get to that point.
Well, and that goes back to what we talked about before with self-care, right?
Self-care.
That's for you.
I know. Right? I mean, it was a big deal. The next thing you're talking about, which this is going to hit home with everybody, is emails. And I'll just want to say this. I've gotten better. I used to be like this too, I have to say. So I can't condemn any others. But you email and you're like, well, why haven't they answered? Well, what's going on? Well, why didn't they answer me? Is this not important? And then you're irritated if you don't get an answer immediately. And I want to hear what you have to say about emails. What do you feel on the email?
I mean, I will get emails from students when I check my email in the morning at 8 o'clock that says, why didn't you respond, basically? And then I go back and I look in the email they sent me at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like, well, why didn't I respond? I was asleep. Give it a little time. And we've gotten to the point now where a lot of people now have, as part of their email signatures, that they thoughtfully only address email at certain times during the day, or they try to stay off of email after 6 o'clock at night so they can alert people to the fact that, I'm not responding. It's that's my practice.
Yeah.
We've gotten to the point where we are connected 24/7.
I know.
And it's really not a good practice. A great scholar named Sherry Turkle's written a series of books about this topic, and one of them is called Alone Together, right? Mm-hmm. That we are constantly feel like we're in conversation with people, but we're not. We're really sitting alone in our rooms. That email has really, in some ways, doomed a lot of the art of conversation. And with the generation that's coming up now, it's not even email; it's texting. They don't even do email anymore. It's text.
I couldn't get it out quick enough. I was like, no, it's texting. Yeah. You know what? I don't like it. I'm just going to be honest.
I'm not a fan.
No, you know what I feel like? I feel like texting is like an easy way out.
It is.
It's like you don't have to talk to that person on the phone,
Yeah,
have a normal conversation where your vibrations connect and where you get, instead you're texting. And it's just so impersonal.
it is. And it's funny because it also encourages us to do things more quickly and to respond without really giving anything any thought. I mean, even let's take a step back from email. When people used to actually write letters, right? I
Yes.
mean, think about how much energy and how much thought needed to go into writing and sending a letter. You had to sit down and write the letter out. You had to put it in an envelope. You had to address the envelope. You had to put a stamp on it. You had to mail it. With email, I type, and hit send, and it's gone. And
So
that's why so many people get into so much trouble with email, because it doesn't give them a chance to really think
really
about
think,
what they've written and what they've said before you click on send.
well, and the same thing with text or with Twitter. There's been times where, and with Twitter, you can't fix it right away.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I'm one of these, my eyesight is not as good as it used to be. And so I have my bifocal contacts, but sometimes I make a mistake. And if it's on Facebook or if it's on Instagram, I can correct it. But if it's on Twitter, I can't. And so it's really, it's difficult. I will say
Yeah.
this. Let's go on.
Well, it's funny because last night I saw a commercial for the new iPhone.
Okay.
And one of the new characteristics of the new iPhone is that you can easily unsend text messages.
Oh, well, I'm gonna get one because I have an old iPhone and it's time my kids were laughing at me because I haven't upgraded, but I'm gonna upgrade. So that's really cool. I'm glad to hear about it. This is something else I wrote down here that really hit home about anger. Excuse me, is you know, early on when we're in school, we play dodgeball. Why do we do that? Why do we do that?
Do kids still do that? I don't even know. In this day and age, is that even allowed?
I don't know. Do they even get out and go outside? But the deal is, you know, dodgeball. I can remember. I don't know about you. I can
That was
remember.
frightening.
I was frightening. I was a little skinny kid.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to, get hit by the ball. I mean, it's, and if you think about football, this last week we had,
Yeah. Oh boy.
yeah, where we had the football player who went into cardiac arrest. And it came across my mind. It goes into this, what we're talking about. Why do we still do this?
Well,
Why?
we live in a violent society, and that kind of sport is not a modern invention. If you go back to the ancient Greeks, I mean, a lot of those sports were invented to keep the soldiers occupied when they weren't in battle. And so these soldiers who were used to being in battle and fighting the enemy and trying to kill the enemy, it was replaced with these competitive sports where they could engage in a similar kind of behavior without the same fatal outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I grew up being a cheerleader, and I always, yeah, I did. And I actually cheered for the Lions, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, after this happened this week and the way the world is, I thought maybe it's time we just give it a rest.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a football fan. I watch. I have my own problems with the league and with the sport and
Right.
everything that's gone on. But when that did happen last Monday night, I think I actually put something up on Facebook that said this could be the end of the sport.
Maybe it needs to be.
Maybe, maybe it does. It has become increasingly, I don't want to say increasingly violent, but the problem is that as the players get stronger and bigger, it becomes more violent.
Mm.
The fundamentals of the game haven't really changed, but when you move from somebody who is 200 pounds to somebody who's 350 pounds, there's going to be a different impact when that person hits somebody.
Right, right. Well, it's just a crazy situation. Let's move on. You talk about angry comics. I didn't even realize how angry the comics
Oh
were.
yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. Richard Pryor, which I love Richard Pryor, but he was angry,
Yeah.
pissed off at the world, excuse my language. George Carlin, I mean, George Carlin was downright raunchy. He really
Yep.
was. You talk about Andrew Dice Clay, same thing. Like they're getting up there and just releasing their anger onto everybody else. Is it that energy? And I'm
Yeah.
into. I wrote a book on energy.
Well, and it changed a little bit though, from somebody like Richard Pryor and George Carlin to Andrew Dice Clay and Lewis Black and folks like that. I think I relate in the book that I remember the first time I saw Lewis Black, I was terrified because I thought he was going to have a heart attack right on the stage. He was so angry, and then I had to do some research to realize that it's kind of an act, and I mean, what he's really expressing is outrage. And I think Pryor and Carlin did the same thing. They were expressing outrage. I think Lenny Bruce did the same thing. They were expressing outrage with society, outrage with the world. But the mode and the way that that's conveyed has gotten a lot more vicious and vitriolic.
Yeah, well, it's gotten crazy. You talk about in the New Testament, um, versus the Old Testament. This was really interesting too, I thought. So their angry terms were used 714 times in the Old Testament in Hebrew. And then when you get to the New Testament, it's more focused on the sin. When you're in the Old Testament, it's more focused on the sinner.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and traditionally, I mean, the Old Testament God is about discipline, and the
Yeah.
New Testament God is about mercy and love. And
It's
so it's a real shift. And so the focus in the Old Testament often is on punishing the sinner, whereas in the New Testament, a lot of the discussion is more about avoiding the sin.
I think it's about who wrote it.
Possibly.
I wrote down a note here because it's true. Moses got angry because he came down from the mount. He got the 10 commandments. He's got them in his hand, and he sees there they are. They've created this golden calf. They have this idol, and here he is talking with God, and they've done this, and he throws them, and he breaks them.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal because I mean, talk about that a little bit. What do you
Well,
think?
and his punishment is that he doesn't get to go to the promised land. His punishment for doing that is he has to stand on the other side of the river and look across the river and know that he's never going to get there. And so, again, it's not as much of a focus on what he did. It's a focus on punishing him.
Mm-hmm. So we're supposed to control our anger, which we are. And I like how you put this. You talk about as anger part of our DNA. And I think it is, but I think this is my opinion only. I want to hear yours. You also write anger is accompanied by pain. And I think that's where it all stems from. I feel like people are in pain internally. They don't know what the relief is. I do. It's connecting with the divine, but some people don't. It took me years to figure that out. So they don't know what to do with the anger. So if I'm angry, then I'm going to make you miserable too,
Yeah.
because angry loves company. So
Yeah, I mean, we largely live in a time, I think, of great existential pain for a lot of people. And
yeah,
the only way they know how to deal with that is to lash out.
right. Well, that's what they do. You even say angry emojis. I
Yeah.
made me laugh. I was like, dude, I wanted to send some angry emojis a couple times, but I've refrained. And that's it. You've got to refrain.
Well, it's about restraint, right?
Yeah.
It's about knowing, and it's about figuring out how to deal with those emotions
Right.
in a way that is not going to be destructive, not only to others, but to yourself. Because a lot of the effect of these sins is not necessarily and not only the effect that it has on other people, but it's the effect that it has on you then as an individual, right? It's a recoil.
No, it is. And let's go back to Moses. I believe that's why God didn't let him go, because he had to make an example that anger wasn't appropriate, that it wasn't right. And
Yeah, I mean, the problem in the Old Testament, though, is that God repeatedly does that, and then he gives them a second chance. If you look through the books of the various stories in the books of Judges, You know, the people, the Israelites, consistently sin against God. God gets angry at them and says, "That's it." And then a couple of years later, he gives them another chance.
Right.
And that's really, that recurs throughout the entire Old Testament. I mean, that's what the Genesis story is, right? I mean, the Noah's Ark is about a second chance.
Right. Well, he keeps giving me second chances, so I know that he does. But my point is that the punishment for being angry to Moses, I never really thought about it until I read your books, truly. And he was making an example. Don't be angry. You have a choice. You can either be angry and go out and kill somebody. There's so much, and the reason I bring this up, and I don't mean to get on a whole soapbox here, but there's so much anger. People are killing each other. I've watched so many murders, and it's like we've become desensitized to it because it
Oh,
happens.
we have. We definitely. I mean, our local news here, I really can't watch it anymore because every morning it's like a police blotter. You know, what bad things happened last night, and it's oftentimes shootings and murders, and it's really, it's disconcerting, to be sure.
Yeah. I'm just saying we have a choice. That's my opinion on that one. And it really reiterated that when you brought up Moses and him throwing, and I never thought about it before. You know, you bring up a lot of things in this book that, you know, kind of make you think. I just want to say that, you guys. All right, listen, let's hit one more of the seven deadly sins here. I brought up gluttony.
Ah, yes.
Why do people overeat? And you say, is this a moral issue? Is this a biological issue? Is this a psychological issue? Um, I think they're filling a void, personally. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people certainly are by overeating. Again, you know, gluttony is eating, basically eating to excess. And you know, it struck me, and I think I relate this story in that chapter, when I was at a conference watching this man at breakfast,
Yes.
and watching him at a buffet just eat an enormous amount of food. And he was an enormous gentleman, and I happened to be sitting across from him in the dining room of the hotel, and I'm sitting there and I'm wondering just what's going on there. You know, and I remember quite vividly, before he ate, he took a napkin out of his pocket and he had a whole bunch of pills that he was about to take, because, you know, I don't know, he was diabetic. I don't know what the issue was, but and then by the same token, you know, the sort of the obverse of that is all the problems that we have with eating disorder. I mean, that word eating disorders, right? Eating disorders can refer to everything from things like anorexia and bulimia to overeating. You know, and if you sort of scratch the surface, it's quite interesting because after, I think, AA and NA, right, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, the other group that has the most attendance is OA, Overeaters Anonymous. It's a real problem in our culture. And at Overeaters Anonymous, it's interesting because you get people who go to those meetings who don't necessarily only overeat. They also have problems with, as I say, things like anorexia and bulimia. And so there's this problem with food about, you know, what is enough, what is not enough. And, you know, some of this is connected with things like awkward and unusual body image, right? Dysphoria and things like that. But some of it is, I think, the way in which we're raised. I know that's what happened to me, and I think I talk about this in the book. I mean, my parents were baby boomers, and you know, growing up as a kid, the sign of affluence was that you were able to purchase prepackaged food in the 1960s, when all that was becoming available. My mother never baked a loaf of bread in her life. We ate Wonder Bread, which is incredibly overprocessed,
Yeah.
and not very good for you. It doesn't have the kind of nutrients that homemade bread would. And that's what I grew up on. And I think a lot of us grew up on those kinds of processed foods, again, because they were a symbol of affluence. I've made it. I don't need to bake bread. I can go and buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
But
Well,
the effect of it on millions of people has not been good, myself included, who have struggled with my weight since I was 12.
yeah, I just want to say, as I've gotten older, my body has rejected the processed food. Um, Even to the point where I bought some, and I won't mention the brand, but I bought some pre-made rice, like in one of those packages.
Yes, yes, yes.
I got oh, I'll just do this and put some veggies in there. It'll be fine. I was so sick. I have to make real rice. I can't eat processed food. My body rejects it. It used to not. Maybe it's because of age, could be just the more connected. I will say this, the more connected I am, I can't drink. I'd like to have a glass of wine, but my body rejects it. I like to have the processed cookie. I can have one, not two. My body rejects it. My body rejects meat. And I've talked to so many different people. The reason I'm saying this is because I feel like in a lot of ways, we've gotten so far over the top with the McDonald's, with the processed food.
Oh, yeah.
With all the things, the preservatives, it's the preservatives, all the stuff they put in there, the sugar, the, high fructose corn syrup, all of it, that the only thing we can really eat, to be straight with you, I think, are just fresh fruits and vegetables and nuts.
Well, and I mentioned this in the book. If you want to see the distinction, I mean, look at the way that the size of refrigerators has changed in the history of America since the early 20th century. I mean, our refrigerators now are huge because we keep all this processed food in it that stays forever. I mean, my grandmother, had an ice box, right? Big wooden box, and the iceman would come once a week and deliver a big block of ice for the top of it. And the only thing you kept in there was fresh food. And there still is a tradition in many of the areas throughout Europe. When you travel, you see that people shop for fresh food every day. They don't really buy more than they eat in a day because they don't buy things that have a lot of preservatives in them.
Now I'm going to rewind because I think that's the way it should be. But my parents always stored a lot of food, but they grew up during the Depression.
Right. So there's the reaction to that as well. Absolutely.
Right. So then I find myself, this is it comes down generationally. I
Sure.
find myself storing things. Oh, well, I got to have enough just in case.
Right.
Was learned behavior from my parents, because what if something happens? And you have to change that mindset. Like the birds don't worry, they're going to get fed.
Right. But I mean, as you know as well as I do, that changing a mindset is that's a hard thing. It's like a culture change, right? I mean, it takes a long time. And if you've grown up a certain way, thinking a certain way, I mean, I and especially for somebody like me as a Jew who connects so much with food,
Right.
I mean, a lot of the foods that I eat will bring back memories of my childhood and my parents or certain events. And, that connection is a trigger, both positive and negative.
Yes. And I will say that, like my mom, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, my mom made the best fried chicken ever. And she would make rice with bacon and butter.
Oh, gosh.
And it was the best ever. But I would never make that today, ever, ever, ever. But I know that it would make me sick and it's just not good for me. And back then, I don't think they just didn't know. I think they just didn't realize.
Well, a lot of it was they didn't know. And although she made rice with butter and bacon, it was also probably all fresh.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't boxed rice and it wasn't, prepackaged bacon. She was getting the bacon from the butcher and, it was different.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. One thing I want to bring up, it always hit me really hard. I went on a cruise and it was one of those, I guess was one of those Carnival cruises. This is years and years ago. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe that people were killing themselves and basically knocking each other over to get in the buffet line.
Yeah.
And on top of it, they had, and I'm no judgment here, by the way, no judgment. This is just an observation. I was like shocked because I had never seen anything like this before. They all had these big gulp cups.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they kept filling them up. And I was just this is like probably 15, 20 years ago, but I was like just getting into the point where you don't drink soda. And I'm watching these people and I'm thinking, oh my God, look what they're doing to themselves. But I just never seen anything like that. And it kind of goes, it's almost like how our society has been, me first. It's the gluttony. We're back to the gluttony. I want the best. I want to get those strawberries before that lady back there gets them. Yeah. I mean, that whole attitude, I still see that. I still see
But
that.
look at the difference in the way that we talk about those kinds of things, you know. And I think I mentioned this in the book. In America, buffets are all you can eat, right?
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I was in Wales. In fact, I still have the picture hanging up here in my office. I took a picture because I found it so interesting. This is 30 years ago. Was walking down the street in Wales. There was a picture in a window for this restaurant that was a buffet, and it said, "Eat as much as you like." And isn't that different from all you can eat? All
Yeah.
you can eat is eat until you explode.
I know.
Eat as much as you like is just what it says. Eat as much as you want to.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Well, it's really, I don't know. And then you talk about the shows, you know, that would have been on television, Fat Albert, Shallow Hal. You talk about some of those things and people just overdoing it. Now, gluttony is really referred to not just food, it's also wine. Because in the Bible they talk about the overconsumption of wine, and it's interesting. You know, Jesus drank wine, but I don't think he overdid it. Everything in moderation.
Sure. And again, that's what these sins are all about. It's not that you're not supposed to eat. It's that you eat in moderation. It's eating to excess when it becomes gluttony.
Right.
And, you know, there are folks who certainly, you know, go the other way, right? I mean, you know, if we look at traditions, particularly in Christianity with asceticism and, you know, folks who go on long fasts for spiritual reasons, you know, there's an interesting sort of connotation to that when you start looking at things like passages in the Bible where I mean, you're supposed to eat. You need to eat in order to live. But as many people will often say, don't live to eat.
Right. Well, and I've been reading up on a lot of different things, and I started to bless my food. And it's the energy of that blessing. It's the energy. And I don't know, you probably do it too, but your food actually tastes different when you bless it. I'll just say that.
Well, because that what that does is it forces you to slow down,
Yeah.
right? You slow down, you think about the food, where did it come from? How did it grow? Who grew it? Rather than just sitting down and stuffing your face.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. We've got to get back to the old. We've got to go backwards a little bit in time. And I'll sit down to dinner and I'll say grace. I grew up like that. And I think people need to get back to that just for the reason you said, because it makes you slow down and it makes you think and reflect.
Yeah.
We've been talking for quite a while, but I do want to hit on envy real quick. Cain and Abel. Right in the beginning. I mean,
Yeah.
come on, you know, right in the beginning of the Bible, there's anger, self-esteem, you know, the whole situation. He's envious. Talk about this.
Yeah. I mean, Cain is envious that Abel seems to be getting more of God's blessing than he is. And as a result, he kills his brother. And envy, if there's any of the seven sins that seem to kind of dominate the culture today, it's probably that one, because social media feeds it, TV feeds it, all of the media that we engage in on a daily basis really encourage us to be envious. I want that. I envy you that, and I want it. You know, if I'm watching, if I'm on Instagram and I'm following some celebrity, it's about envying their life and thinking, you know, wow, they've got a great life. I wish I had a life like that. But even let's get away from celebrities, right? It happens even with people that you know, because the fact of the matter is that what we present on social media is not necessarily a real reflection of truth. We are, you know, putting out there an image. And oftentimes the mistake that people do engage in is they take that image to be truth and say, well, you know, why is she having such a great life? I want that. What, you know, I envy her. And you realize that, but that's not really true. That's what you're seeing on social media.
Right. Well, everybody has problems. Yeah. And it is exactly right. How can I say this? In the beginning, I kind of liked Facebook because I got to see what the people who I grew up with that I hadn't seen in 20, 30 years.
Sure.
And that was kind of cool. But yes, it's become now where look at me and look what I have. But that to me, and I'll just say this because I'm at a different point in my life and I'm here doing this show trying to teach people that that isn't how to do it. It's really about, if you're happy with yourself and you're connected with the divine and you're fulfilled on the inside, when you see somebody else have something that you don't have, you're happy for them.
Right. Right.
But when you're not happy yourself, this is what I see, and this is what I have experienced. When you're happy with yourself, you're cool. But if you're not happy with yourself, then you become angry and envious. And then that anger, that envious energy comes in. The key to understanding envy, you say, is to see it, or Aristotle said, I'm sorry, the key to understanding envy is to see it as a feeling of injustice. People feel like it's not just, like you said, why does she or he have that and I don't? Yeah,
it's Cain and Abel, right?
Yeah,
Well, Cain saw it as unjust, right? Why is Abel getting more of God's love than I am?
Yeah. Well, but here's where this comes to be a problem. Einstein wrote one of the evils of socialism was to eliminate, along with injustice, envy itself. And that's a problem. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is, we could do a whole other podcast on the problems of capitalism in our culture and what it's doing to us and how it forces us to engage in these sins in many ways. Yes, I mean, I understand what Einstein's saying there, and there's some truth to that. But the fact of the matter is, going back to the point that you just made, if you are comfortable with yourself and you understand who you are, then everything should be cool. Yeah. But it's when you don't feel that way, when you feel like you're getting the short end of the stick, that somebody else is doing better than you are, and oh my God, why isn't that me? That's when you run into that problem. And one of the things that I keep coming back to in the book, and we've been talking about it today, is the importance of just slowing down and looking within and understanding who I am. Because it's really pointless for me to envy what you have if I haven't first really understood who the hell I am.
Right. Very good. Very well said. Wow, David, thank you. You guys,
thank you.
7 Deadly Sins. How Sin Influenced the West from the Middle Ages to the modern era. Fantastic book. You guys need to pick this up. How can people get in touch with you if they would like to, David?
Yes. So my website is David A. Salomon. It's Salomon. I'm not like the king. I got one king with David, but I didn't get the other king. DavidASalomon.com, and you can find the links to all my books and my blog and speaking engagements and my consulting.
Fabulous. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a fun conversation. Hey, guys, if you want a psychic reading, go to my website, nancyyearout.com, and tune in next time to our show. This is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity. Everybody take care and God bless. Please join me next time on the High Road with stories full of love and hope for our future. You can find High Road to Humanity on TogiNet Radio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and now watch The High Road on Binge TV networks. My channel is High Road to Humanity. Have a blessed week, and know by staying on the High Road, you will make it to your destination. For a psychic empath reading, visit my website, nancyyearout.com, to book your date and time with me. I will deliver your messages from the angels, and God bless.